Good morning, students. In the previous class we discussed multiple inheritance. So in multiple inheritance, a class which is derived from two or more base class, we already discussed a typical program on multiple inheritance. Today I will show you how to write a program on multiple inheritance in the examination. I will give a simple program. Header files # include iostream.h # include conio.h class name of the class I will take base 1, class name is base 1. In the public section I will take a function void print this is base class 1. Close. So as per the definition, multiple inheritance means a class which is derived from two or more base classes. So I have taken one base class, its name is base 1. Another base class I will take class base 2. In the public section, void show cout class, this is base class 2, this is base class 2. Okay, so in the previous example I had taken typical considerations. For example, a customer wants to read information and an employee, like that I had taken real-time examples. For the exam point of view, I have taken a simple program. There I have taken only one member function, each class having one member function, and we are going to derive these two classes from another class, that is derived class. Class name, I will take name of the class is derived, colon, visibility mode, I will take public. I am going to inherit base class 1, this is base 1 as a public mode, base 1, comma, public. You must mention access visibility mode separately for these two classes, base 2, in the public section, void display cout. This is derived class of base 1 and base 2. See, in multiple inheritance, two or more base classes are there and one derived class. Here, base 1 and base 2 are the base classes. From these two classes, I am going to inherit this class, that is derived class. So base 1 inherited as a public mode, base 2 also public mode. We must mention access visibility mode separately for these two classes. Now I have to create object for derived class. In the main function, void main, I will take object, I have to create object. You all know how to create object, class name and variable list semicolon, isn't it? So what is the class name here? Derived is the class name, derived. And object name I will take D. When you create object, what happens? There is a memory allocation for this object D. See, the mode of inheritance is public. You all know the visibility mode and what are the rules of these visibility modes. There are three visibility modes: private, public and protected. any class can be inherited any of these three modes, either private mode or public mode or protected mode. In this example, I have inherited these two classes in the public mode. So what is the rule of public access, public visibility mode? Base class public members are become a public members of the derived class. Base class protected members are become protected members of the derived class. Private members of base class cannot be inherited. This rule we have already discussed, isn't it? So what is there in this class? This is a base 1. In this class, void print is a member function. It belongs to public access specifier. So I did not take private and protected access specifiers. To make you understand easily, I have taken only one member function in each class. This program you can write for the examination. For that purpose only I have taken a simple program. If you are comfortable with the previous program, you can go ahead with that. But while accessing a member, we have to be careful that member belongs to which access specifier, whether it is inheritable or not, how to access. These things you need to remember. So if it is difficult for you, you can go ahead with this program. It is very simple. Nothing is there in this, means data member is not there, only member function I have taken. So it would be easy for you. Class base 1 contains one function, that is print, and class base 2 having another one function, that is show function. So they are all public members. This public member will inherit it to the public section of the derived class. So derived is a derived class of base 1 and also base 2. Okay, base 1 class is inherited in a public mode. That's why the public member of a base 1, what is there in the public access specifier of base 1 class? Print function is there. This print function has become a public member of this derived class. And another class, base 2, that is also inherited as a public mode. This show function also inherited to public section of the derived class. Now total there are 3 functions in the public access specifier of derived class derived. I hope you are understanding. So these 2 member functions are in public section. The visibility mode is public. So these 2 becomes the public members of the derived class. So how to access public members of a class? Using object and dot operator. I want to call first print function. We can call directly from this object d dot print. Though it is a member function of this class, base 1 class, it is already inherited to derived class. So it can be accessed through the object of this derived class. And I want to call show function using this object d dot show. And one more, d dot display. Close. Understood? So this is about multiple inheritance. See here, the pictorial representation would be like this. Base 1, this is a base 1 class, and another class base 2, base 2. So from these 2 classes we have inherited one more class, that is derived class. So this is derived. What are the member functions of base class? What are the members? Members nothing but both data members and member functions. In this example I have taken only member functions. I did not take any data member there. So what is the member function of this class? What is that? Print. Print belongs to which class? Base 1. Another class is base 2 and its member function is show. And these 2 functions are inherited to derived class, and derived class its own member function is display. Okay, so using the object of derived class we can access print function, show function and also display function. Understood? Next, type hierarchical inheritance. Hierarchical inheritance. You all know there are 5 types in inheritance: single level inheritance, multi-level inheritance, multiple inheritance, hierarchical and hybrid inheritance. Among these, we have already discussed up to multiple inheritance. Now the next type is hierarchical inheritance. Sometimes 2 or more classes are required, same data which is already exist in the base class. So a base class which is going to be derived from multiple classes. So what would be the definition? A class which is derived from, or 2 or more classes are derived from single base class, that is hierarchical inheritance. Okay, one base class and more than one derived classes, like this tree structure. Let us consider this is a base class and these 2 are the derived classes of this class. So this is hierarchical inheritance. If it is a class A, class B, class C, B and C are derived classes of class A, and these 2 access the properties or members of class A. Understood? So let us write the definition first. So 2 or more classes are derived from single base class. In this type of inheritance, 2 or more classes are derived from single base class. Single base class. Okay, what would be the syntax here? Syntax. While writing syntax, I'll take class name as A. You can write same in exam. Class A, private, public. You all know every class having 3 access specifiers: protected, members, here also members. Members are nothing but data members and member functions. So this is base class. Class B colon visibility mode, base class name. What is the base class name here? A. So B is a derived class which is derived from the existing class A. Here also private, public and protected. Members, and one more class, class C colon visibility mode and class A private, public, protected. Members, so this is a syntax of hierarchical inheritance. We can take another class also, class B, class C, class D. 2 or more, minimum 2 classes are derived from the existing class, then it becomes hierarchical inheritance. Now, pictorial representation. A. This is base class. From this class we have derived two classes named as B and C, derived from A. It is also derived from A. Understood? So when they ask explain hierarchical inheritance, first you need to write the definition, syntax and example. Later I will show the program. So what are when we use hierarchical inheritance? Consider a situation. See, I will take two classes, one is employee, another customer. So employee details are like this: employee ID, employee name, employee salary and address. And another thing is customer name, customer ID and customer address. Here address includes street name, street number, then city and layout name, state, pin code, and these are the things which comes under address. So in both classes, employee class and customer class, both classes having a data member address. For each class I have to mention all these things: street name, street number, city, pin code, state, everything I have to declare in both classes. So these same thing will be repeated here. In order to avoid this redundancy, I can make use of existing class. If I take a class called address, there I have declared all these things. I can inherit the properties of existing class to these two classes. So we need not to write street name, city name and state name, pin code every time in these two classes. Already there is a class, that class having these details. So only thing is we can inherit these properties to the derived classes, that is employee and customer. Let us see the program. Consider a base class name is address. Class name is address. Here data members are like this. In the protected section I will take protected, because protected members are inherited to derived class, not a private members. Int street number, char, street name, I will take 30, city, char, city, I will take state, in pin code. These data members are required in both classes. Instead of declaring 2 times, we can take a class which contains these many data members, and I will take a functions here: public void input cout enter street number, street name, then city and state. C in extraction. Street number, street name, city, and one more pin code is there, no? Pin code. Here pin code, how you have taken? P code I will take. P code. One more function, display void disp cout street number. In front of that, street number has to display. After that, I'll take cursor to the next line. Cout street name st name cout city state and pin code. This class address is a base class. It contains these many data members. To read these data members, I have taken input function, and for display purpose, I have taken disp function. Let us derive a class emp employee from the base class address colon public. Base class name is address. Sorry. Class emp colon public. Base class name address. And this class having its own data members, employee ID in the protected section, or you can take in a private section, int employee ID char employee name. Okay, then for address already we have taken class, this class already inherited to derived class. In the public section, void scan cout enter employee ID and employee name, C in extraction EID extraction E name. After reading employee ID and employee name, I want to read employee address so that I can call this function input function, which is already there in the address class. Now void print here cout employee ID EID. In front of that EID has to display \n. Next cout insertion employee name, E name, \n. Now cursor comes to next line. After that function close, class close, semicolon. One more class, class customer, customer also a class which is derived from the existing class, that is address. So colon, both classes I am going to derive in a public mode, public address. In the private section, I will take customer ID, CID, char, customer name, customer address. Instead of writing customer address here, we can make use of these data members. In the public section, void get data. I will take name of the function get data. Here cout, enter customer ID and customer name. Cin extraction, CID extraction, CNAME. Now void show, I will take name of the function is show, cout, customer ID, CID \n, cout, customer name, CNAME. Close. See, this address class is going to be inherited to these two classes, employee and customer. So employee make use of this address and customer also. Let us take a object for both classes, because if you want to display employee detail, you have to create object for employee class, and for customer class I must declare object for customer class. I will write here main function, void main, open flare bracket. So this is first, and it is fourth part. Now I want to access members of employee class, so I have to create object for employee. EMP, object name is E. I want to read employee ID and employee name. For that purpose I have taken scan function. I have to call scan using this object E dot scan, open close parenthesis, semicolon. After that function having only employee ID and employee name, you can read these two data for that data members. And I want to read address, employee address. So employee address, it belongs to address class. So we have inherited this class to these two classes. So I want to read employee address. Already these members are inherited to this class, that is protected section of the derived class. Here protected, I will make it as a protected. Here also, so which is a default access specifier, private is the default access specifier. If you take private members here, it cannot be inherited to derived class. Here I will take protected, int customer ID, semicolon. See what happens? Base class, protected members and public members are inherited to derived class. This is the rule what we had learned. See, what are the protected members? These are the protected members, and public members, these two functions are the public members of this class. So these two members are inherited to derived class. What is the derived class here? EMP is a derived class. So what is there in the protected section of the derived class? Employee ID and employee name. These two are the data members of this particular class, its own class. A derived class data members, it is its own class data members. And what are the inherited members? These many members, these are the data members. Street number, street name, city, state, pin code, these are the data members which are already inherited to derived class. So the protected section of employee class having these many data members, also its own data members. So scan function, it reads only employee ID and employee name. And these two functions, input function and display function, these two belongs to which section? Public section, and these members are inherited to derived class, this employee class. So the public section of the derived class having scan function, print function, these two are its own functions, and two more functions, input function and display function, these two are inherited to this class, that too in a public section. They are become a public members of this derived class. Okay, now using scan function we have read data for employee ID and employee name. Now I want to read address for employee. Enter employee address. I'll write here, see out. Enter employee address. Employee address. So in order to read employee address, there is a function, input function, okay, which is already inherited to derived class. Now I have to call e dot input. E dot input, open close parenthesis. Now, so when you call input function, what happens? What is there in the input function? Enter street number, street name, city, state, pin code. Isn't it? One more you can add door number, and also I have taken only these many data members. Street number, street name, city and pin code. So these members are read from this function. After that I want to call get data function. This is about the customer. So I have to create object for customer class. How to create object customer? Customer. I'll take object as C. Now I want to read customer ID and customer name. To perform that we have taken function called get data. So I must call get data function C dot get data, open close parenthesis. So that get data function, it reads customer ID and customer name. And next thing I want to read customer address. So let us give a statement here, see out, insertion, enter customer address. So in order to read address, there is a function called input function. So this is a reusability of a code. This is the importance of inheritance. This code is already there in the base class. So we have inherited this code to the two derived classes. One is employee and another one is customer. If it would not there, this base class concept and inheritance concept, every time we have to mention these many data members in both classes, and we have to write instructions again. Now which function I have to call? C dot get data, C dot input. So input, it is a member function of this base class, and it is inherited to employee and also customer. See here, customer also a derived class of address, employee also a derived class of address. So employee class public section having this member function, input function and this function. Similarly, public section of a derived class is customer also having input function and display function along with its own functions, get data, show, input and disp function. So total it has 4 functions. Here also 4 functions in the public section. So that I can access a base class member function through object of this derived class, customer. I want to display customer, now employee ID, employee name and address, employee address. So how to display? There is a function called print e dot print. Okay, so it display employee ID and employee name. Or in order to avoid confusion, I can give a statement here. Employee details are, I can give like this, cout employee details. So when you display ID and name, it is understood it is it's a employee, it belongs to employee. E dot print, the print function display employee ID and employee name. Now I want to display employee address also. So which function is there to display address? This function e dot disp. Now I want to display customer details, cout insertion customer details, c dot, what is there? Show, c dot show, and one more same. Now I want to display customer address. So to display customer address, again I have to call the display function using this object, c dot disp. You all know when we create object, there is a memory allocation takes place. So from which object we are calling a function, those members are goes to that object. Here customer C, employee E. Employee E is an object of which class? Employee class. When you create object, there is a memory allocation for E. What are the data members of employee ID, employee name? So, and it inherits the properties of address also. So for these many data members, there is a memory allocation. When you create customer C, there is an object creation. For this object also, in that object data members are customer ID and customer name, and it inherits the properties of address. So for these data members, there would be a memory allocation in customer object. Understood? One thing you need to observe here, both classes are inherited as a public mode. So that's why the members are inherited to public section of the derived class. I'll modify this program. One class I'll derive as a public mode and another class I'll derive as a protected mode. Let us see that program. I'll take same example, but I'll minimize the data members now. Header files, # include iostream.h, # include conio.h, class, address, in the protected section, protected, I'll take only city name and state name, char, city, I'll write from here, char, city of 20, char state, if city name it characters, if it exceeds the 20 you can take 30. In the public section, void void scan cout, enter city name and state name. Enter city name and state name. Cin extraction, city extraction, state. One more function, void disp cout city colon insertion city \n cout state colon state so class close. What I am doing here, same previous example I have taken, and I am going to change the visibility mode. One class I will derive as a public mode and another class I will derive as a protected or private mode. I will take protected mode now. Class EMP. EMP is a derived class of which class? Address colon public. So this class I am going to inherit as a public mode of inheritance, and base class name is address protected. What are the data members of employee? Employee ID and employee name. Int employee ID, char employee name. In the public section, void get data cout, enter employee ID and employee name. Cin extraction EID extraction ename. Void show cout insertion employee ID colon EID cout and employee name ename. Class close. Another class customer, class customer colon. Now I will inherit this class as protected mode of inheritance. Protected. Before I have inherited both classes as a public mode. Now I will change the mode here. That is, you need to observe, this is public mode of inheritance and it is a protected mode of inheritance. Address. Here in the protected section, int customer ID, char customer name. When you put semicolon means it's the next line. that is a statement terminator. Though you have written in the same line, it considered as a next line statement. Public colon. Now I'll take functions, void scan. Already we had taken scan function. I'll take input function here. To avoid confusion, I have taken different functions name. Cout, enter, CID, customer ID and customer name. Cin, extraction. CID, extraction, CNAME. Void, disp, Cout, customer ID, CID, Cout, customer name, colon, CNAME. Now consider main function. Void main. See here, employee is inherited as a public mode and customer is a protected mode of inheritance. Now I want to read details for employee. So I must call get data function. To call get data function, I have to create object for EMP. Okay. So what happens here? So this the mode of inheritance is public. In this inheritance in the employee, when we derive employee class, I have taken public mode, public visibility mode. So it is a public mode of inheritance. What happens? As per the rule, public mode of inheritance, base class protected members are become protected members of a derived class, and base class public members are become public members of the derived class. So what is there in the base class protected section? City and state, and these two are become protected members of the derived class. Okay, and functions scan and disp, these two are become a public members of the derived class. So this class having 4 data members and 4 member functions, so that I can access directly. Employee E. So when you create object for E, what happens? There is a memory allocation for E. What are the data members of E? After inheritance, it contains 4 data members. 2 are its own class and 2 inherited members. Employee ID, employee name. Employee ID, employee name, and city, state. City and also state. There is a memory allocation for these data members. Okay. And what are the member functions? It can access scan, disp, get data and show. Get data and show. For these members, there is a memory allocation takes place when we create object E. Understood? So E is an object of employee class. Employee is a derived class of this base class address. When we create object, what are the data members? It belongs to that employee. For those data members, there is a memory allocation. So employee ID and employee name, its own data members, and city, state are inherited members. And there is a one set of memory allocation for the member functions, 2 member functions from base class and 2 from derived class. Understood? Now I want to call get data function. So E dot get data So these two instructions will be executed. Enter employee ID and employee name. So this will be input and it will be stored in the data members where employee ID. For example, XYZ employee, 111, employee name I will take XYZ. Now I want to read address, city and state. So which function is there to access or to input city and state? Get data function, scan function. Okay, so scan function also inherited to derived class, so that I can access scan function through the object of EMP. I will write E dot scan. To read address of employee, I'll call scan function. One more. Now I have to read customer details. I must create object for customer. So this is a customer class C. So what happens when you create object C? There is a memory allocation. So this is for employee and I'll take another object C. What are the data members of C? Here, customer ID and customer name. Customer ID, customer name. You all know data members, every object has its own data member memory allocation, but there is only one set of member functions. See, it is inherited as a protected mode of inheritance. What happens? What is the rule? Protected mode of inheritance. Base class protected and public members becomes protected members of the derived class. So what is there in the base class protected section? City and state are the protected members of a base class. Scan and display are the protected public members of the base class. These members are inherited to protected section of the derived class. See here, what you need to observe, this class I have inherited as a public mode and this is protected mode. The public mode, respective sections. Protected comes to protected section, public comes to public section. Whereas in customer class, it is inherited as a protected mode of inheritance. So base class, public and protected members. These two members are inherited to protected section of the derived class. Now the customer protected section having customer ID, customer name, city, state, scan, display. All these members are inherited to protected section of the derived class. Understood? Now the memory allocation would be like this: state, city and state. Member functions, what are the member functions here? Scan, disp. So these two are inherited members. Input and disp. I'll take display here. Display and base class members scan and disp. Base class members scan and disp, and derived class input and display. Now the object C can access these functions. Okay. Then how to access? Because the mode of inheritance is different. In protected mode of inheritance, base class protected and public members are inherited to protected section of the derived class. Now I want to read customer detail first, customer name and customer ID. Which function is there? Input function is there. Are you understanding? Input function, it reads a value for customer ID and customer name. So I have to call this function. It belongs to public section, so I can access. A public members can be accessed outside the class, can be accessed from outside the class. C dot input. what happens? Customer ID and customer name will be read. Next, I want to read customer address. To read customer address, there is a function. Address na read ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತಾನೆ ಒಂದು ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಯಾವುದು ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಅದು? Scan function. Already scan function is inherited to derived class, but it is in the protected section. Is it possible to call like this? C.scan. You all know there is a function called scan. It reads address. From which object you will call that function, that object address will be read here. If you call scan function using employee object, so that address belongs to employee. If you call this same scan function using customer object, so what you have to understand, the address it belongs to customer, that is a customer address. Understood? So C.scan, the scan function is a member function of base class, isn't it? So it is of course it is inherited to derived class. Agla inherit agbidide. To which class? Customer class. But where it is there in the customer class, that is in the protected section. So if I write like this, C.scan, is it the right function call? No, because scan belongs to protected section. We cannot access protected members from the outside the class, isn't it? Main is not a member function, it is a non-member function. A non-member function cannot access protected member of a class. Then how to call scan function? How to read customer address? So we must call that function here. You know, protected members are accessed through the member function and friend function of the class. Here scan belongs to protected section of the derived class customer. Okay, then how to call scan function? Now I want to execute scan function. From where we have to call that function? From the member function of this class. Are you understanding? Scan is a protected member of a derived class. This protected members cannot be accessed directly from the non-member function. Then how to call scan function? Through the member function of this class. What are the member functions of this class? Input function and display function, isn't it? So public members, any of these member functions of the class we can access. How? Scan. I can write like this. After this, scan, open close semicolon. Input is a member function of customer class. So input is a public member, so that I can access directly from the main function. C.input. So after execution of these two statements, there is another function call in this function. Are you understanding? Scan is a protected member of this class. As per the rule, protected members are accessed through the member function of that class. Input is a member function. So from this function I am calling scan function, so that I can call input function from the main function. Okay, and here I want to display employee details now. How to display? There is a function called show function. It displays employee ID and employee name. Cout, insertion, employee, employee details, E dot show. Next, I want to display employee address. So this function is there now. E dot disp. Here I am calling disp function from the main function, because disp function has become a public member of a derived class. Okay, where is there in the derived class the disp function? Disp scan and disp functions are in the public section of the derived class. So I can access these two functions from the main function using the derived class object. But in this particular derivation, customer, it is derived as a protected mode. Protected mode alli derived ಮಾಡಿದೆ. So these all protected and public members are become protected members of the derived class. So I cannot access directly from the main function. Okay, now I want to display customer details. Customer details. C dot. First I want to display customer ID and customer name. There is a function called display function. C dot display. Now I want to display customer address. So customer address, which function is there to display address? Disp function is there. Just now I explained disp function belongs to protected section. So I cannot write C dot disp here. So I have to call that from display function, disp. When you call one member function from another member function, you should not use object and dot operator. Understood? Because disp is also a member function of this class, but it is the protected section. A protected member is accessed through a member function of this class. Get CH, close. You all know always execution starts from main function. When you create object EMPE, memory allocation would be takes place. After that, E dot get data. Which function will execute here? Get data. Okay, get data, it's a member function of this particular class, EMP class. Then it display employee, enter employee ID, employee name. If I give employee ID 111, it will be stored in EID of E. And E name, I have taken XYZ. After execution, next function is E dot scan. The scan function, it belongs to this base class, but it is already inherited to the derived class. It is there in the public section. So the public member of a derived class can be accessed through main function directly. E dot scan, so it reads the city and state. City, I'll give DVG, Karnataka. After that, customer object I have taken. C dot input. Input is a member function of customer. C dot input now. What happens? Enter customer ID and customer name. It reads the customer ID and customer name. Here customer ID, I'll take 121, customer name ABC I'll take. Okay. After that, after the execution of these two instructions, one more instruction is there in this function, scan function. The scan function contains enter city, state name. Okay, then city and state, I'll take city, Bangalore, state Karnataka. Then after execution of this, again control transfer to main function. What happens? Employee details. I want to display employee details. E dot show employee ID, it display employee ID and employee name. After that, E dot disp function, it's a base class function, but it is inherited to member function, public section of the derived class, city and state. After that, I'll display customer details. To display customer details, I'll take a function called display function. I'll call that function C dot display. It display customer ID and customer name. After that, I want to display customer address, city and state name. So customer address, disp function is there. Address na display madakintane one function, disp function. That function belongs to protected section of the derived class. So I have to call a protected member from the member function of this class. So I should not call disp from main function. Understood? That is the difference between a previous example and this example. So these are the typical examples to show a hierarchical inheritance. For the exam point of view, I'll take a simple program and each class having only one member function. You can write that function in the examination. For each and every type of inheritance, I had shown you how to write a simple program on that particular type. Okay, so whichever you feel comfortable, you can write that program in the exam. But to understand, I have taken different programs on each type. Now, next type, hybrid, sorry, I did not show the example, no? This is for exam point of view, class, base, public, void, show, cout. This is base class. I'll take a derived class. Class, sub, name of the class I have taken sub 1 colon public. Here I'll inherit both class as a public visibility mode. Base. Base class name is base. Public, void, print. This is derived sub 1 is derived class of base. One more class, class sub 2 colon public mode of inheritance. Both classes are inherited in the public mode. The public section, name of the function I'll take disp, void disp, cout. This is, sorry, sub 2 is a derived class. Sub 2 is derived class of base. Now I'll take main function, void main. Here, sub 1 and sub 2 are the derived classes of this class. So the pictorial representation would be like this: base, sub 1 and sub 2. I have to create object for both classes in order to access a particular class member function. Sub 1, object name I'll take S1. So S1 can access print function and also show function. S1 dot show, S1 dot print. Understood? Now I want to access disp function, so I must create object for sub 2. sub 2, I'll take object name as S2, S2 dot disp S2 dot, sorry, first I have to call S2 dot show function, show, then disp S2 dot disp, close. Let us see the output here. Assume this is the output screen. When you create object, there is a memory allocation for S1. S1 is the object of which class? What is that? Sub 1. Okay. So S1 dot. So S1 dot show is there now. What is there? S1 dot show. This function will execute. What is there? This is base class. This is base class. After that, S1 dot print. Sorry, instead of writing this as I'll take base is a base class. Here also I'll change. Base is a base class. After that, S1 dot print. What is there in the print function? Sub 1 is derived class of base. Sub 1 is derived class of base. After that, sub 2, another class object I have created, sub 2, its object name is S2. S2 dot show. What is there in the show function? Same. Base is a base class. Base is a base class. After that, S2 dot disp. What is there in the disp? Sub 2 is derived class of base. Sub 2 is derived class of base. This is about hierarchical inheritance. So, in the next class, I'll explain hybrid inheritance. Thank you.